All right, we're back, and we are COMP305. That's Game Programming 1 in the fall 2017 semester at Centennial. And it's Thanksgiving weekend. And for some people who didn't come in, I'm broadcasting live. Just a reminder that tonight you will have to hand in your second draft of your game design document, which means I'm looking for more sketches, that kind of stuff, a little bit more detail on what your game is about. You should know by now. Some of you will not know because you haven't touched your game, which I encourage you to really get going on. I will open up a Dropbox later on today for you to submit. So that's what's happening today. And we're also talking about Unity collisions. So last week, just as a follow-up, we tried to do collisions without using Unity's collision system. And today we're going to kind of do the other way. So I'm going to bring up my Unity here. Since we recorded last week, Unity's come up with another update. I'm running 2017.1.1F1 right now, but as of this recording, but just last week, they updated to 2017.2. I think there's some significant improvements that they put into it. I'm not going to upgrade yet. I'll probably try and upgrade over the weekend. But let's see what happens. So I'm going to continue with this COMP305 F2017 mail pilot demo that we worked on last week. And again, I'm just going to launch that. As you can find that if you look at GitHub under Centennial, you should see a couple of links here. One of them is this mail pilot demo. This is the one I'm looking at right now. Okay, so if you go to that site, and I've pinned these things up now, the repository, so you can actually see them a little easier. Should have done that a while ago. All right, so what we had, I did fix it. So what we had last week was something like this, where you have the clouds, and then if you kind of hit a collision with the cloud or an island, it would only collide once. That's what we had. Okay, so how did I do this? Just as a recap, I'm just going to bring up my my game controller here. Let's see if it's actually going to run in mono-develop today. I'd be surprised if it doesn't crap out. It crapped out. Yay. I'm not sure what happened with my system. After upgraded my system, mono-develop just doesn't seem to go. But we're going to use Visual Studio instead, which is totally fine. Let's try this again. All right, so Visual Studio Mac. There we go. Okay, so when this comes up, I want you to take a look at the code a little bit, just so you understand what's happened. So what we did is I was working with an interface that wasn't really working, so I changed it to a class. And if you look up here, guys, so you can see it, in order for you to make a class available, let's see if I can make this a little bigger. And maybe not. Hopefully you guys can see this code, but you can see that there's two classes, right? In the game controller, there's the main game controller class plus this, okay? This class that says custom controller. I called it custom controller for two reasons. One, I wanted my objects to have an is colliding as well as a name, right, that I could recognize them with, and a height. Okay, so those are the three things I had. Okay, so in my controller, right, in my game controller, I also established some public objects here, player, island, and cloud, and the cloud number. We talked about those things. As well as I created a list, going back to C# basics, a list of type game object, right? Of type game object, which I kind of made clouds a game object, right? So basically the clouds, I can keep track of all the clouds and kind of regenerate the clouds as we go, right? So this class here, this class that's called custom controller, is inheriting from the superclass mono behavior. Why is that? So mono behavior is the scripting class, right? And so custom controller, what I've done is I made this and added a few properties. That's all I've done. Okay, very, very simple. So once that was done, we have, again, this code is available up on GitHub if you take a look. We have a few transforms that are private, And all I've done is created almost like aliases, as if they are, so that I can get to the player transforms, the island transform, and the cloud transform. And remember, what these transforms are is a component that gives us position, location, and scale. Sorry, position, rotation, and scale. Okay, so that's what it does. Then what we did is inside the start method, we would instantiate the list of cloud objects, right? And build up the number of clouds that I wanted based on the cloud number that I put into my inspector. So if I wanted 3 clouds, I put 3 in there. If I wanted 2 clouds, I put 2 in there. Okay. Now here's my check collision method, and we're going to replace this today with the Unity check collision method, right? But there's a couple things also I want to talk about. So my check collision method, what it does is it takes a look at any other game object, right? Any other game object, and it basically uses the built-in vector2 distance method, which calculates the distance between 2 points, right? That's the collision method I'm using right now. So it says, hey, take the distance between the player transform, right, the position, as well as the position of the other game object, right? And if this distance, the combined the position, right, is less than the player height plus the other object's height, right? If that is true, if those two things are true, right, then check to see if the other object is already in collision mode. If it's not in collision mode, then hey, I've got a collision, right? So first of all, am I colliding? Yes. Now check to see if I've already kind of turned on the flag that says I'm colliding. And we talked about why I did this. And we need still to kind of keep this logic here for a couple reasons. Because if I collide one time, I'm still going to pass through those points over and over again for the next at least couple frames, right? Remember, I'm doing 60 frames per second. So I'm polling the system over and over again. And so if I didn't do this check to kind of turn on that I'm colliding and then turn off when I'm not colliding anymore, right? And if I did sounds or I tried to score points or anything like that, I would have a number of points just passing through the cloud one time, right? Or passing through the island, I mean. Or I would lose a number of lives. I would lose all my lives right away, right? And so this logic I'm not going to change. I'm just going to change this function. We're not going to use the check collision function I made. We're going to use the OnCollisionEnter, which is a new function that I'm going to talk about from Unity, for those people who have never done it before. In my update method, I'm checking collisions for the island only, and then I'm checking collisions for each of the clouds. So each of the clouds gets its own check, okay? So this is the typical way. By the way, the code I'm showing you will work on any system, on any kind of code. If I'm running in C++ and I was going to do this thing, or if I was going to write it with JavaScript or something else, this code works. But Unity makes it easier, and that's what I wanted to show you. So this is the hard stuff. And then we can talk about some ways of doing it easier. Here's the other thing. Question for you guys. Should I put 2 classes in one file? What do you think? Should I put 2 classes like this in one file? And can I separate this class somehow and use it in another file? What do you think I should do? What's best practices for you guys? Each class separate file. Okay, so this is the first thing I want to try and change. So this system serializable. Notice I've made a custom controller. So I want to copy this thing for now. So I'm going to copy it. And I want to go back out to Unity, right? And I want to create another script, right? So it's going to be called custom controller. I'm just going to show you that you could have more than one script attached to an object. That's why I'm doing this. So I'm going to create a new C# script. I'm going to call it custom controller. And in my custom controller, notice I'm getting an error because the namespaces are the same right now. In my custom controller class, right, it's going to inherit from mono behavior. This is good, right? So it's inheriting from mono behavior, right, as it was, right? But my custom controller class, right, my custom controller class, I already kind of outlined right here. Custom controller, it's a public class, right? So all this stuff I've already done. Now I want to make this class system serializable, just like I did over here, just to show you, serializable. I'm still inheriting from mono behavior, and I definitely want to have these 3 things in there. So I'm going to copy these things and I'll put them in there. I don't need any of this stuff though. The void and start and update methods. right now, I don't need that, so I can get rid of it. So this class, all its purpose is to give me some more control over my game object. That's all it's going to be, right? Now, if I have that, I can get rid of all this, right? And I got to attach this custom controller class back onto the object, okay? Just to show you that I can do this. So I'm going to go back to Unity, and I'm going to take my, notice that the arrow went away, and I'm going to go back to my game controller, and I only have one game controller right here, or one script, but now I'm just going to pull up my custom controller and pull that in as well. So that's what I want. I want to kind of pull this in so that way I have another class. So I can see I can have a number of scripts, and that's why the game controller script itself is so powerful, right? Because I'm using an empty object, right, to attach my game control, game logic, right? So I'm using my objects, ocean, player, and island, as objects, right? But my game controller class is the main game controller or game logic that I'm using to do things like, hey, am I colliding? And I can even break this down further if I want. Let's run it to make sure that that change works, right? And I'm still, you can see that I'm still colliding, right? So that change still worked. So when I splitting it up didn't really do anything. It actually helps organize, right? Let's take a look at some other things I've done already, right? So I did my cloud control. Here's my cloud controller, and I got some but I got this too. I got this range, this public struct range, right? Notice again that it is system serializable, and I want this public struct range with a minimum and maximum values to be shared amongst everything else. So this is kind of a utility, right? That I'm putting together, right? This utility class. Okay, curious. So I don't want it to inherit from mono behavior, right? Notice that my cloud controller, by the way, is now inheriting from custom controller because I created this as a subclass of the new class I just made, right? Custom controller inherits from mono behavior, which mono behavior is the class that all game objects typically have, right? And that's why I made cloud controller work. And same thing, I'm sure, for island controller. That is also a custom controller class, right? But let's go back here for a second. So if I go to my cloud controller, I want to have this out in its own file as well. What should I call it? Can't be a class. I mean, I've called it a struct. I've called it range, right? Is there a way of doing it? And yeah, there is a way. So let's try and talk about this as well. So I've got, again, my utilities, and I want to make this little file, right? Right here. If I go back, this little file, this range, is kind of a kind of a utility class, right? This range thing. So I want to call it utilities. I want to kind of put it inside of a utility file, right? I got to be careful here because, I mean, I could call it range too, and we can make as many. Let's just do that. Make it easy. So I'm going to kind of make it over here. So I'm going to go over here and just call it. I'm going to create a new C# script, right? And let's rename it. We'll call it range. Okay. Now, as soon as I do this, it's going to collide, right? And if I double click on it, now this is a class, and it's a mono behavior script class, right? I don't care to have this like this range class, right? In fact, I don't need Unity engine here. I don't even need collisions. I don't need any of this stuff, right? So let's just go back to that cloud. All I need is to get the system serializable thing here. I'm going to cut this out just to make it even. Oops. How about I cut all of it out? And then just cleaning up right now, just a little bit. Okay, just so that way, you guys aren't saying, Tom, you program like crap, right? I don't want that. So I'm kind of killing all this stuff. And just putting the system serializable thing in there called range. Notice that these become grayed out because I don't need Unity engine. I don't need system collections right now. And I only have this little struct that I want to use. So, and I can add to this struct later on. Remember, a struct and a class are very similar. The only thing is that a struct is a value type and a class in C# is a reference type, okay? So I'm just using a struct to carry some values. That's all I'm doing right now. So if I get rid of all this, will it work? Oops. Will it work? And yes, it will if I just don't click on the wrong area. Well, I get rid of it. So I can just really do one of these. Okay, cool. And let's see if this will work, right? Because I mean, I just need to attach it now. So I'm going to go to my game controller again. This is where it should be, right? In there, right? And it says, oh wait, the script needs to derive from mono behavior. Otherwise, I can't attach it. That's messed up. Well, hear me out. That's why I'm testing it out, right? So I can't attach it unless it derives from mono behavior somehow. And for it to derive from mono behavior, that means it must be, I'm putting it out there for you guys. It must be a class, right? Or I can actually have a struct that derives from mono behavior too, right? But will it work anyway? So I've got this, it's a struct that hasn't been attached to anything. And all I'm doing is making system serializable, right? Remember, I need my, so clouds, I need to change this to 3 clouds to make this thing run, not 30 clouds, 3. That's one change I got to make. Actually, let's get rid of that again. It already is 3 clouds. I'll be okay. But in my island, I have a horizontal. This stuff here is still supposed to work, right? Here's my height for my player height. I have that as an option, right? It doesn't know what it is. I should put that in. My ocean has a range, top position or whatever. What happened to the range that I was going to add in, right? Because I should have a range of values for some of these things. Is it still going to work, right? Because I've kind of taken range out. So let's see what happens if I do that. So do I get collisions first of all? Yes, my collisions work, right? And you can see that even though my range method is not, or my range struct is not a part of things, I'm still getting a very similar behavior. Okay, let's take a look at what uses range. So remember that I didn't use range for my player because my player does one of these. It says player has my left boundary and right boundary, but I can use min and max, right? And I can use my left boundary and right boundary instead of my, I'm just doing a little bit of optimization here, guys, not because I want to kill you guys and drive you nuts, right? So left boundary and right boundary here, this is interesting, right? If you think about it, it's just the range, right? It's really a range between a minimum and maximum value, right? So I could call it boundary, right? You know, kind of like an object called boundary, which derives from range that has a minimum maximum value, right? And if I did that, then I could I could actually put in here my, instead of this dot right boundary and this dot left boundary, it would be you know, boundary dot min, boundary dot max. I can show you how this would work, right? So this is something I could do if I want to optimize. I won't do that right now. So here do I use range in here, right? So I have these fields, top position, vertical speed, and top boundary. Okay, interesting. So top position and top boundary. And then as I go through, I use my top boundary to reset. So if it's less than or equal to top boundary, and I can kind of create this. I use it for the ocean, because all the ocean needs to do is just, as it meets the top boundary, it resets. Right, just to let you guys, you know, kind of understand that. Okay, here's my island controller. So I'm just going through each one. My island controller, again, it has a reset position, a vertical speed, and a horizontal border. Again, horizontal border could be a min and max, right? If I really want to. So there's my bounds, it exists, I check. And notice that, again, I don't have a thing, but I've got a random range. Here's my random range. I can use that. So what did I use range for? Here's my cloud controller. Ah, here it is. Look, range. So even though that it's not attached to anything, my objects still work whether they're mono behavior classes or not, okay? Once I make them system serializable, then I can make other things inside, and I have them inside my scripts folder here, and I can still control and do stuff with Unity, which is really cool. Okay, so that's what range is being used. I have a vertical speed and a horizontal speed, and this is what I use my range for, to kind of vary between going slower and faster in my clouds, because I didn't want my clouds to look all the same. All right, so let's try this one more time to make sure that we're still functional, and then we're going to get to the other stuff. Yay, we're still good. Now it's really, really slow because again, what's happened is I'm running in a simulator and I'm also broadcasting. So it's cutting my speed down a little bit. Okay, so that's where we are so far. Now what I want to do is I want to start using Unity collisions. Okay, this is what we're going to do on the scene. This is where we can cut some of this stuff down. So how do I do Unity collisions? First of all, remember we talked about, you can do collisions with a bounding box. We talked about that last week. You can also do collisions, instead of a bounding box, you can use distance like we did, right? And you can use two phases of collisions. You can have a broad phase collision in more complicated situations and a narrow phase collision detection. So broad phase would be, hey, don't check collisions until the object comes closer, right? And when the objects come closer enough to collide with, then start checking collisions, broad phase, right? And then when they're really close, now you're going to do your narrow phase collisions, which is, okay, they're really much closer now. I can start doing my narrow phase collisions and check to see if everything's okay. Yay, it's all working, that kind of stuff, and it saves us some time. What Unity does is kind of a combination of broad phase and narrow phase, but they use a rigid body and that kind of system, because Unity can also have physics tied to it in their 2D objects. So here's my plane. Let's go down here and I'm going to zoom in here. Here's my plane. So what Unity allows us to do is add additional components to my object. So here's my plane, and notice on the right hand, there's a bounding box for it right now. This is the box for its sprite. So the sprite kind of goes up here because you see the cloud, the actual, we've got the shadow right here. So questions, shouldn't my bounding box be a little bit closer if I was going to do it? Because we don't care about the shadow. The plane itself is what I want to collide with, not the shadow. I don't care about the shadow. That's one thing. And I got all this space up here and over here and down here. And remember, we talked about this. If you collide, if you actually intersect with this part over here, it'll be a logical collision, but not a visual collision, right? Now, something that comes into this box here. So what does Unity do to fix this? Well, first of all, let me I'm just going to minimize these things a little bit. I want to add a component, and you can see that I have to go into the physics 2D area here, and you can see that there's a couple of colliders I can add in. First of all, if I want to have physics work, I can add a rigid body 2D. Rigid body 2D, what it does, it gives the ability for physics processes and forces to work, like gravity, which is the main one, or some kind of friction or something like that. I can add these things in. Unity's physics system is built in. It's an actually add-on. I believe it uses PhysX, the physics game engine, which is kind of really cool. It's like Bullet, but it's not quite Bullet physics. So there's different kinds of physics engines. So again, going back, you've got your game engine, Unity, and you have a physics engine, right? And those two things are separate. Unity just uses this other physics engine, which is very popular. And I believe so does Unreal. Unreal and Unity use the same one. All right, so if you notice, so here's my box collider. I can do that. So let's see look what a box collider does. If I put a box collider in, well, it looks like it brightens this area. I'm just going to zoom in here a little more. You can see now that the bounding box of the sprite and the box collider is in the same way. If I click Edit Collider, right, what it allows me to do is tighten up my bounding box. So I can kind of click on these little handles and really pull my bounding box in, right? Remember, we talked about bounding box collisions, though. So I'm going to kind of move this in. So this is one kind of collision detection that I can put on an object. If it's a squarish object, it works okay. And notice I don't care about the shadows. I want it to be kind of tight. This is pretty good. I don't have a lot of space in here that I'm going to have a problem with, right? So I think I'm okay. So this is one type. I could use this. Let's look at some things that I can do here. Is trigger, okay? Let's leave that checked off for now. Used by effector. Forget that. Used by composite. I'm not going to look at those right now. Auto tiling. Okay, no. Here's my offset. My offset, what it does, I just resize the bounding box, and my offset can move the bounding box to the left or to the right of the object, right? So if I want to change this offset, so I want to move this to this way or that way, you can see that I can actually shift the bounding box around to make sense of where it should be as a whole, right? So if I want to kind of, if somehow my object is what's being drawn and what I want to put a bounding box on are two different things, I can shift it around. Edge radius. This is interesting. What this does is I can add something on the edges to make it more effective. And this is something new that Unity's added in. Here's some more info. You can see that there's no rigid body. There's no friction. You can see there's no bounciness. So this all this stuff is turned off because I don't have any rigid body attached to my object. Okay, so very interesting. So this is one type of bounding box, one type of collider. And you can actually turn some of these things off. By the way, components can be turned on and off by these check marks. So if I click on the checkbox, the component can be turned off, right? So even though I have a bounding box on, I can click it on and click it off. And you can see the difference between the bounding box now and the actual bounding box of the sprite. Those are two things that are different. Let's turn this off. Let me put another collider on. So I'm going to say, let's put another collider, and we'll put another physics. We'll go to physics 2D, not physics. Physics only works with 3D, the standard physics component, right? There's also something called a circle collider, right? That's cool. Here's my circle collider. It's not bad, but you can see that there's more stuff that'll be outside of the box. And again, just like I did last time, what I could do is I can shrink the radius of my circle so it's more realistic. And also I can offset it, let's say across the X and the Y, so that I can make it more or less effective. Now, if I was going to use this circle collider, you know, if you notice what I can do is I can shift it. I can make it so that the top has very little. I'm going to mostly have collisions from the top. So if I was going to have, because this is a top-down game, right? So objects are going to come at me. So I can shift this around just to make it a little tighter. Let's say just almost, let's say there. And I can move this around until I have a bounding box that kind of works a little better. So that's another one I can use. Now notice there's a lot of space over here. If I was going to play a space game and getting collisions from all over the place, because of the shape of my object, this may not be good. Some bullet hell games, though, all they care about is that your pilot's alive. So the bounding box is right around that cockpit, right? So you can have all kinds of bullets come at your plane, but as long as it doesn't hit your cockpit, you're good to go, right? Kind of thing. That's not the game we're making here. So this is not an optimal collider, right? Again, if I click on this, I can change these factors as well. I can move these things around. I can also try and change the radius manually, as well as shift things around. I have an X and Y offset, so I can keep on playing with this radius to make sure that it is more effective. Notice where I'm clicking. I'm actually clicking to move things just on the X, and when I do that, I can actually use my mouse to move things around. This is just using the tool. Now my wings stick out, so that's not really great. That's the second type of collider. Let's go over the next one. Just going through the colliders so you understand what they are. Okay, Polygon Collider, yay! Whoa, what the heck is this, right? This is like a mesh collider, all right? Now this takes up more cycles because what Unity is trying to do is calculate the shape of the object, but it gives us huge control. So I want to make a more accurate collision detection. I can edit my collider. Now, if you have a shape like this, it's important that you get right in there. And what you can do is notice where there's a little dot. So I've got a little dot as my mouse follows, right? And if I pull this dot down, I can kind of create the shapes that I want by dragging the dot around. So I can kind of follow. Unity's trying its best to figure out what my shape is, right? But I can follow this as close as I want to make this. It takes a little bit longer to make this thing, but you can see that. We'll put another point in here, right here. And you can see that I can move my collider, my collision system around, right? So that way, look what Unity's trying to do. See these extra lines here? It's trying to triangulate, right? Because it wants to create as many triangles as possible to kind of figure out what the shape of my polygon is. This is a very strange polygon, right? Because I'm kind of changing the shape. It's not a standard polygon, that's for sure. And I don't want to make something like this edge here. So this edge is kind of weird. I got to bring this in as much as possible so that way I can help Unity out. Because Unity is only just trying to figure out by calculations, my math, using math, where all my stuff is. Now this is really meticulous. And because I'm using this kind of collider, right? You can see that there's more geometry that I'm giving Unity a chance to understand. So that way there's more calculations. Just simple and as plain as that. The more geometry I give it, the more calculations it has to make, more accurate the collision system. So if I want to get some kind of, I want to provide Unity with more of a simulation type thing, that's great. For small games with not a lot of enemies, as an example, then this might be okay. Games with lots and lots of enemies, this Polygon Collider will slow the game right the hell down, right? So we don't want that. Notice there's no way I can do symmetry or anything like that. I have to actually do the plane or the object by hand. But you can see a very close wrap. And for the most part, this is the most accurate type of collider you can make. Right? Notice that's wrapped right around the ship or the plane. Okay. So that's the Polygon Collider 2D. It's like a mesh collider. If I was going to do this in 3D, there's something called a mesh collider, and it's very similar to that. It'll try and wrap, or shrink wrap some kind of polygon around the object as much as possible. That's what it's doing. Okay, so this one. You can see I can also offset this thing if I want to. Again, I can make it a trigger. We'll talk about triggers in a second. I can also add a collision material. I'm not going to do it. I'm just going to turn this off. Yay. Okay, so that's that collider. And you can see that it's kind of, even though it's turned off, I still, because I'm clicked onto it, I can still do something. All right, let's add the next one. So we're going to try these out. Here's my physics 2D. Here's my edge collider, right? Edge collider is interesting, okay? I want it, it just gives me a line. Now, why would this be good? Suppose you're making a platformer, right? And you don't need the whole platform, as an example, to collide. You want maybe some kind of special effect. You want to, you're on a trap, a pit trap or something like that. Or you want an effect to happen where when someone crosses a certain line, the enemies start coming at them. Right? You can use edge colliders all over the place to kind of detect things like to do broad phase and narrow phase collisions as well, right? So what is it good for? Well, I can again adjust it similar to the Polygon Collider. I can do something like this. Well, look, I don't care about collisions to the right and left of me. All I care is collisions in front of me. So then, hey, let's make it so that I can add some geometry here. It's just an edge. I can't loop it, but I can almost do the same thing that I did with my Polygon Collider, where I create some edges. All I care about is this part. And then you can see that it's much simpler geometry. I don't care about the left and right. I can't collide that way. Want a little bit of it, I can extend it, kind of thing. I can make it a little bit more complex. And again, as I do this, it becomes more taxing on the system. The more lines I add, I'm actually adding line segments. That's what I'm doing here, right? And as I do the line segments, I can make it so that most of the plane is covered, at least in the first part, right, by more geometry. And again, I'm just adding some more points here. And the way I'm doing that is I'm just clicking and dragging. So chances are only this part of the plane is going to collide, let's say, right? And I can add some more lines here. So it kind of wraps the plane a little bit, but not the whole plane, because I don't care. Chances are no one's going to collide from me from the back. All I care about is this part. So it's a little bit more efficient, let's say. I'm putting it out there, guys, just to show you what I would do. So that's my edge collider, okay? Similar to the Polygon Collider. I'm adding another one. Let's go to Physics 2D. And so let's talk about the capsule collider. The capsule collider, there's a composite collider. We're almost done. Here's the capsule collider. Okay, what the heck? It looks like a circle. Yes, it is. But now we have our size both in X and Y. It's not quite a circle. And this is a new one. We never had the capsule collider before in previous versions of Unity, right? So now what I can do is I can kind of make it so that it looks closer. If I had more of a roundish shape to my object, I can still use kind of a circular collision system, but now I can really make it so that it is closer to the shape that I want. Now, there's only so much control, as you can see, right? So I can only make it so that I can do one edge, right? I can also modify one edge over the other, but there's only limits of how close I can get, because even if I go lower than that, it won't actually show anything lower. Here's the direction, vertical. I can also go horizontal, right? So depending on which one I want to do, if I want to kind of scratch this out, this is kind of neat. Take a look at this, right? That's nice. That's pretty nice, right? What I got there, right? So that's much better, right? And I can change my offset on the Y just to pull it down a little bit. That's not bad, right? It's better than the circle collider, that's for sure. And then see if I can crush the H in this part a little bit more. That's not bad. It's almost going to capture everything I want. So there you go. That's the capsule collider. So it looks the shape of a capsule, almost like a, an object that has, it's like a cylinder that's capped at both ends by something less round. Okay, cool. So that's the capsule. I'll turn that one off. Last but not least, right, there's a new one. It's called the composite collider, right? All right, now, whoa, what the heck is this? As soon as I added the composite collider in place, I also got myself a rigid body. Whoa, that means I got physics happening on this thing, right? Why does it do that? Well, it's usually used for, more complex collisions, all right? So it says outline geometry is composed of edges and will not preserve the original collider's center of mass, of rotation inertia. The composite collider 2D is attached to a dynamic rigid body 2D. So you may need to explicitly set these if they are required. That's what it says. So you have no choice. These two must go together, right? Notice that I don't have control over what's happening, but it says the geometry type is outlines. So it kind of does what the other ones do, more complex. Things here. One is the generation type, synchronous, cool, right? If I click manual and the vertex distance, what I'm doing is actually really wrapping my object. Well, you can see that it's also going to wrap my shadow because my shadow is part of the plane, right? So this isn't the best kind of collider. If I click on regenerate collider by a hand, I can also specify an edge radius as well if I really want to. So this isn't bad if you're doing something really complex. So I'm going to remove this one because I'm definitely not going to use this one for our plane, right? And notice that the rigid body 2D stays in there. Let's talk about rigid body 2D for a second. So I got mass if I want to. If I want to add rigid body 2D, I can add it in. I can't turn it off though. So I can turn off the other ones, the collisions. Notice they're like checkboxes. But once I add rigid body 2D in there, it's always on, right? There's two types of body types, dynamic, kinematic, actually three types now, and static. Static would be if I was going to make some kind of wall, or if I was going to jump on a platformer, something that's not going to move or be affected by gravity. Static, right? Kinematic means I'm going to move it around, right? I'm going to move it around, and I want kinematic. If I want to attach animations to the object and have the animations propel the object, almost like synchronize the animations with the locomotion. Okay, and dynamic is the basic one, which gives me things like if I want to make it so that it falls or whatever, that's the typical one that we use. Okay, notice that it's a simulated. If I turn this off, what this does, it says, is the body to be simulated? If not, it is effectively hidden from the simulation. So in other words, if I unclick this, then all this other stuff won't be affected. So if I click on, if I uncheck this stuff, then basically this body has been taken out of the simulation, the physics, along with any attached colliders, joints, or effectors. That means none of the colliders will work. Okay. Let's undo this one. Let's just get rid of this thing for now. And let's see if I can do some different kinds of collisions here with all these things. So first I'm going to start off with my box collider. Okay, here's my box collider. Okay, cool. Now in order for me to do my box collider effectively, remember, I'm going to collide with another object. Okay? Okay, so how do I detect collisions with my collider system? Well, my collider is going to kind of collide with another object. Right? That's what it's going to look like. And let's go back to my code. So in my plane, okay, now I had my collision system attached to my game controller. I'm going to turn it off right now. Okay, so I'm not going to use my game controller's collision detection system. So I'm going to go back to my game controller. And even though it's really cool, I'm going to just go here and right at the bottom where it says check collision, I'm just going to undo this. I'm going to leave the check collision method, so I'm not going to get rid of it. What I'm going to do instead is I'm just going to take it out of the updates. So I'm just going to kind of comment this out so that there's no collision happening over here. Again, if you want to follow along, please download my code so you can be on the same page as me. Okay, so there's no collision. Now, what I want to do instead is I want to do my collision. I want to report my collisions, right, on my my player controller. So here's my player controller. My player controller right now has a collider that's turned on, right? Let's take a look. So if I go back to my code here, or my my object, if I look at my player, I only put my collider on my player, right? I have this box collider 2D. That's the first one I want to check. Right, so here's my box collider 2D. You can see that I've tried to make my collider as close as possible. Do I need colliders on my other objects? Do I need them to detect collision, or am I just detecting collision on my player? Right? Let's take a look. All right, so let's see how this works. In my player controller, on the bottom, I'm going to create another method that's built into mono behavior, and it's called OnCollisionEnter 2D, if I'm not wrong. And if to check that out, if you wanted to go to, if I go on collision enter 2D and Unity, you can see that I spell it right. You can see their scripting documentation online. And the scripting documentation gives us an example of this. It says, hey, when an incoming collider makes contact with this object's collider, 2D physics only. Further information about the collision is reported in the collision 2D parameter passed during the call. If you don't need this information, then you can declare on collision enter 2D without this parameter. All right. Collision, it says events will be sent to disabled mono behaviors to allow enabling behaviors in response to collisions. Okay. So what it just told me is, hey, you do need a collider on the other objects, right? So the two colliders, they provide bounding boxes, right? So I have to have colliders on the other object. I have to have colliders on my cloud, and I have to have collider on my islands, right? That's what I have to have in order for this to work, okay? But this is the kind of stuff how it works. I have this void on collision enter 2D with the collision 2D object called call in this case. And I'm saying this, if my collision game object.tag is equal to enemy, then it's a collision, right? So this is the way it's going to be written. So let's try this out. So I'm going to say void, right? And then I'm going to start writing on collision. This is nice. I never had this before. On collision enter 2D, right? You can see that it gives me the outline for what this is, right? And what I'm going to check is if, right, my collision, right? And again, if you notice what it says, the collision.gameObject. So I'm looking at the game object, and then it's saying the tag. If the tag is equal to, as an example, and this is interesting. We don't have tags right now, but we're going to make them. If the tag is equal to island, right? Then do something. Otherwise, if the tag collision.gameObject.tag is equal to cloud, then do something else. So very similar to what we did in our other method, but this does something to our game. Now this is not bad. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just saying this is another way of doing it, and Unity makes it so much easier, right? Like there's not a lot set up. I set up the collider on both on the objects. I save them as prefabs. And now I have collisions. I don't have to worry about superclasses or any of that stuff. Nice and easy. Well, we haven't tested it yet. Let's just try it out and see which one's the best one. Okay, so on collision enter 2D. We've set up some basics. Now we need these things. We need tags for my islands and my clouds. Okay, cool. How do I do that? And what are tags? Well, remember, my player has some other options up here. And if you notice on the top of the game object, there's a tag that says player, right? I just tagged it. The player is actually a built-in tag. But I want to make one for my island and one for my cloud. Notice my clouds are in my prefab. My islands are not, and it's untagged right now. How do I make a new tag? I click inside the tag area and click Add Tag. And then a tag is like the name. I'm naming the object, right? So inside where my list is empty, I'm going to click this little plus button, and I can add a new tag. I'm going to call it Island. Note, it is not attached to this object yet. I've just created a tag. That's all I've done. So to attach it, I got to go back to the object and actually select it as a tag. Yay, now that's the island. Hey, while we're up here, we didn't talk about this, but on the left, there's this little cube, right? Sometimes we get so many things on our screen that we want help to detect where all these things are going on, right? Especially for looking at something. What we can do is we can give an island a little helper icon, right? So I'm going to make it green because it's an island, right? And I can actually select other ones as well, right? But let's make it green for now. And what it does is if I scroll up, you can see that, hey, look, here's my island. But if I go really way out there, right, it'll actually show me my island. Let's go F frame select. It'll show me a little tag on my island if I can't see it. So there's my little tag, right? I can also make it a dot if I want to make it really, really small. Either way, what I want to do is select an icon that represents my island. Okay. Okay, cool. And in my game, right now I don't see my island, but I have to also add, notice in what I'm doing here, I want to detect collisions with my island. I need a collision system for the same thing. So I need colliders for my island. So for now, let's add a box collider for my island too. So add component, physics 2D, box collider. And this is the box collider. Now my island is kind of more circular than my plane is, so we may want to check out other colliders later. But for now, all I want is for this collider to be as tight as I can on the top, mostly on the bottom, because that's where my plane is going to collide. Now there is a place here that my plane may collide that will not be affected. So I'm going to save this one. Okay, there's my island done. And now let's go into my prefabs for my cloud. Okay, this is something else. I need to make a tag for my cloud again. So I'm going to go here, I'm going to add tag. I'm going to change the tag to cloud. Go. And then I need to attach the cloud tag to my cloud. Because my cloud is going to be kind of this gray color, I want to make this thing look a little bit grayish. So I'm going to put that gray one in there. I don't have to do this. This just helps me when I organize my objects. Okay, that's this one done. Okay, I need to add in a collision component system, so some kind of collider. So I'm going to go to Physics 2D, and again, I'm going to use the box collider. Box collider for my cloud, my friends, not a great idea. Why is that? Well, if I bring this cloud object into play, and so you can see what it looks like, right? You can see that when I go into my box collider and I click on Edit Collider, wow, man, look at all this space over here, this space over here. We're going to have issues, right? That's what I talked about. I can make it a little tighter. But this one here, maybe we want either a capsule collider or some other collider, maybe a circle collider if we can do it. Now, here's something else we have to consider. What if I'm making a system and I want to attach multiple colliders? Will that be okay? And the answer is yes, it will. You can actually have multiple colliders on an object, right? So you can make it so that you use simple shapes, but the more colliders you add to an object, the more checks it's doing every frame, right? So if I have a very complex object, a much bigger boss monster or something, and I want the head to have a collider and the arms to have different colliders, that makes more sense because there's nothing that I can wrap around the entire object unless you use a geometry kind of collider, some kind of polygon. But again, polygons are super expensive when it comes to calculations, right? So you got to think about this when it comes to performance of the game. For now, we're just going to have a little box, and we're going to change this up later. But that needs to be in place. Notice that the cloud has the tag on cloud. I can also, when I bring a prefab from the prefabs back into the scene, I also can apply all my changes. So all the prefabs that I bring in, if I make any changes to the prefab, it gets affected. So my instances are all affected the same way. What I mean is if I make a change to this cloud right now, modify some options, but I want all the clouds to be like that, I gotta click the apply button. Great. So I've got my prefab. I can get it out of the scene now because it's going to be generated by my game controller. All right, that's all I need. I don't need to check it in my game controller anymore. My player is going to report stuff. Let's go into my player controller, which is in my scripts. Here's my player controller. And at the bottom here, I'm just going to put some debug information. So I'll say debug.log. Right? And I'll say something like island collision. Okay, we have the same problem though, right? Because it's going to collide a bunch of times, just like we did before. So that logic we made is still pretty good, right? And this is cloud collision, right? Let's see if these work though. Okay, I just want to make sure anything works right now. Save, cool, and run. Let's see what happens. Okay, I got nothing. It's not because of the layers, right? But I want you to think about this for a second. What's happening? So I've got all these collisions and whatever, and I don't got any kind of physics body, rigid body on these things, right? And the question is, do I need a rigid body to make these colliders do it? Didn't say that I did anywhere in the documentation. Just pointing it out to you, right? So, okay, cool. I don't have rigid bodies. Do I have to add them in? And if I do, what kind of rigid bodies do I want? I want them to be dynamic, right? Hold on. And I want them to have zero gravity and zero mass. So I don't want them to be actually affected by gravity. Otherwise, they'll fall all over the place, right? And it won't look like a plane game anymore. It'll look like something else, right? So let's turn that on. So the first component is a collider. The second component must be a rigid body, and then you need to put the script in place. But still, not as difficult as the other stuff. So let me go back to my island or my player. First of all, we took the rigid body away. We're going to put it back. So I'm going to add it at the bottom. So physics 2D, rigid body 2D. And this time I'm going to, my mass got to be 0. My gravity scale is got to be 0. I'm not affected by gravity. Angular drag is going to be 0. Like I want to try and zero out as much as I can because I don't want to be affected by this, right? Collision detection is discrete. So notice that if I didn't have this, right, then I wouldn't have any collision detection. There's also continuous, and continuous and discrete are two different things. If you're using something like bullets, you may want to do continuous detection, right? Or something that's being hit a lot. Let's just use discrete for now and see what the difference is. And by the way, you can use both different kinds of collision detection on the system. Now, curious, do I need rigid bodies in both the player and the islands and the clouds, or just the player? Let's check this out. So run it. So all I put is the on the player. See, I only have the collision on the player, and yet I'm getting the collisions that I want now, right? So I don't need them on the clouds. I just need a rigid body on the player just to be able to detect collisions. So that's the bare minimum that I need to make things work. Yeah. But there's a problem. If I go back to what I did before, if I go back to conflict, see, I'm getting hundreds of collisions with the clouds. And the reason why this is happening over and over again is because if you look at the scene, right? So I'll zoom out here. If you look at the scene, right? Oops. Then my player will have a bunch of collisions happening at a time because I'm not using that logic to detect if it's been if there's been a collision before, right? I only want one collision per cloud and one collision for islands. So let's bring that logic back. Now, luckily, we've already coded that logic in my game controller, and I've already built in my class, so it has this ability to see that if the other one is colliding. I've already set this up, right? If my other is colliding, other being the custom controller, I can access that stuff because it's part of the behavior. It's part of the behavior, right? So I can have this is colliding option. But again, think about what I'm doing here. This custom controller is a script that I'm listening for, right? But I want to do this kind of stuff right here, same kind of thing. So first of all, can I program something like this inside my player controller? So inside my island, right? I want to check to see if it's already colliding by saying something like this. If, right, collision game object, right? And now, can I do is colliding? No. How about if I do something like my my script, right? And forgive me, but remember that the collision object, right? The collision object itself coming in inbound, right? Is of what type is it? It is a collision object. My game object, though, my game object is a game object. Is there a way of making another variable? Let's just do it, right? Where my variable, I'm just going to take this away from now. Where my variable is going to detect, I can convert my collision. So I can say, well, okay, I'm going to say that it's of type collision.tag, right? So I want to make an object, and I got to specify its type, but I don't know its type, so I'm going to put the variable name. So I'm going to put the other, the collision object as other. Okay, so I don't know what the other collision object is. So var other is equal to the collision, which is just the other object that I'm colliding with, right? The collision dot, and then what I want to do is not the game object, but the script, right? So game object, right? Dot get component. And I want to look for the mono behavior script that's on it, right? So can I type in mono behavior? I could. How about custom behavior? Custom controller. Yeah, I could look at that too. Look, I can get, because I know custom controller is built in to the script, right? So I can say this. There's my custom controller. So my other, I want to look at my custom controller of my other that I built in. Remember, I built that class. I'm going to use it, right? Custom controller, right? And custom controller just points to the script, my special script that I made that has is colliding built into it, right? And if I look over here, my object is a custom controller. Just got to answer my wife. She's asking about, should we defrost the turkey, right? For tomorrow, because tomorrow is Turkey Day. Come on, this is our Thanksgiving here in Canada, right? Yes. See, there's one word answers the question. All right. So there we go. So we've got this, right? Now that I do this, can I check it? Can I say, well, if it's an island, I know it's an island. I don't have to check to see what the name is because I've already done it with a tag. Well, I can say that if other, right, dot is colliding. Notice I have that is true, right? Well, it's not if it's colliding, if it's not colliding, right? So if not is other colliding, right, then register a collision. That's what I want to do here. So X here, put that same logic in place, right? I want to do the same thing, right? I want to kind of wrap this same logic, though, around both the gamer tag island and the game object tag cloud, right? So I don't want to just put it here because I would have to write it twice. So this checks to see if I'm colliding. I'm already colliding with something, right? I don't want to check it twice. I want to do this stuff. I want to do this stuff. Up here. I want to wrap these two checks in this. I'm going to say if other dot is colliding or is not colliding. So if not is other colliding, right? Then I want to kind of open up a thing here and put it down here, right? And just space it in. I don't have a way of formatting it right now by doing it by hand. There we go. So that's good. So it checks to see if the other's colliding. If it's not colliding, well, then I want to set it to, if it's not colliding, then I want to check, I want to kind of register the collision, right? If it's not already colliding. However, if it is colliding, and then if, by the way, if I register a collision, I want to set it that is colliding is true. So anytime I have a collision, not, I want to set, depending on which one it is, I don't care which one it is, but the other.game object, whatever it is, I'll put it down here, other.game object, other dot is colliding is equal to true, right? If not, other is colliding. So if my game object is not already colliding, check which one I hit, and then set the other colliding. The other colliding is true. Okay, cool. Uh-oh. It's always going to collide if I come in here. Colliding. So I need another I need another one of these member methods, right, to check when it's not colliding. How do I do that? Private void on collision exit 2D. There's two. There's on collision exit and on collision enter. And then I can say that once I exit the collision, depending on which one it is, I got to do this thing again. There we go, right? So whatever the other one that I'm colliding in, depending on which one I've done, I've got to do this check again. So as I'm leaving, right, I got to check these ones here. Notice there's a little bit of duplication, but I have no choice the way this has been written. If my collision like gamer object tag is equal to island, then I'm going to set this other is colliding to false. That's all I'm doing here. So copy and put that in there and put that in there. Actually, it doesn't matter which one it is. Whatever's collided with me, once this is already been colliding with me and exited, doesn't matter which one it is. I should just do this once. No matter what's colliding with me. Once it exits, I want to set it to true, to false. All right, so it's like a two-liner. Okay, does everyone understand that? This is kind of key to what I'm doing here with community collisions. I've got two type of events. They're like event handlers, right? So I'm registering an event. I'm colliding. Okay, cool. But I only want to show that I'm colliding or do something with my collisions if my object does not have that flag that says, hey, you've already collided. Why? Because otherwise I will continue to collide every frame, right? Cool. But now I've left the collision area, right? Make sure that this is colliding is false so that I can have another check happen. That's all I'm doing. All right. All right, let's check this out and see if it works. So let's run it. Oh, that's not what I wanted. I wanted to run it over here. Let's save the scene and run this thing and see if that works too. All right, so yes, it's colliding. Okay, and I only should get one collision right now and a second one and 1, 2 clouds collisions and a third one. Okay, cool. Let's stop the game and see what I got. So shouldn't have very many. Look. So 1, 2, 3, very few collisions here. And that's good. That's what I wanted, right? Otherwise, it'd be a mayhem. Let's try that again one more time to make sure to confirm that that all worked properly. Right? So I'm kind of playing this up again. Oh, this is a bad situation. So, okay, good. And I got 2, 3. And you can see that I'm only getting a few, even though I passed through the cloud like mad, right? This is good. This is how it should work. So now my collision system is working. Not great, because I think I got the wrong collider from my cloud. That's my opinion, right? And it works okay. Can you tell that I'm getting the wrong kind of collision? Well, here's how we can do that. Here's how we can check it out from debugging perspective, right? Because sometimes you need to debug. So here's my player, right? And I have my box collider on my player. And here's my prefabs. Here's my cloud. Let's bring my cloud prefab in, right? And what I want to do for now is in my game controller, I'm going to turn off the number of clouds. I'm going to make the number of clouds 0. So I can do that, right? So no clouds come in. Cloud, here's my cloud with a box collider. And that should be the only one that comes in. Let's see if that works. Okay, so one collider, one cloud. All right, so let's see, first of all, did I collide there? I did. Look, I did again. I did again, third time. Let's see if what that did for me. I got 3 collisions, and I didn't collide once. Let me show you that again. Okay, so I didn't collide, right? Okay. How about that? Did I collide there? I didn't, though. You notice I was very close, but I didn't collide. Because my collision, my mask is so big, my bounding box so big, and my clouds have a weird shape to them, that box collider on the cloud is not right, guys. And that's what I was going to try and show you. And the same thing goes with my plane, right? So what do you recommend? I showed you a bunch of colliders now, all right? I want your help because you've been just watching, kind of not interacting. And I want you guys to help me out. Okay, so what do I put on my cloud? Which one do you recommend? I'm going to ask over here. What do you recommend? Vincent, which collider should I use on my cloud? Which kind? If you look at my cloud, go back to the scene, and here's my cloud. What kind of collider would you use on this thing? Right now, it's a box.
Maybe a few like multiple capsule colliders.
You could.
So it lowers some of the polygon.
But then I have 2 colliders, right? And that's messed up, right? Like it's like I'm using 2 calculations per cloud. If I have 3 clouds, it's 6 calculations every frame just for the clouds. Never mind for the island or anything else I'm doing, right? Now this is okay. I don't have a lot of objects. But what if you had 10,000 clouds, right? That might not be the best solution. For your solution, it might work. Like what you're saying, it's my small game, okay, right? But maybe not the best choice. Polygon, that's the worst type of collider you can use, all right? It would work perfectly, right? In a simulation environment, it's okay, right? We already did the best. The one I did, the one I did by code, which is the distance, I'll be honest with you, is the best of these options, right? Because it does the least amount of calculations. If you can do it with math, right? I'll tell you right now, inside code, it's far better than if you use some of the stuff that Unity does. Although I'll say that the stuff that the Unity does in the background is more optimized oftentimes than most people's code. I'm just putting it out there, right? All right, so because they've tested this out like hell. Okay, so, okay, we got a problem. So this one, definitely not. So we're going to get rid of this one. So bye-bye. Which one? Might be okay. We can probably put part of the edge because most of the times they're not going to collide to the side. But you see my plane did go to the side because I can go this way on my plane too. So there is a little bit of collision right and left. So maybe the edge collider isn't perfect, right? I mean, I could wrap it around. There's going to be times where I can kind of wrap it. But if I'm wrapping it around, I'm almost making a geometry, you know, kind of another kind of collider. So I want to try and avoid it as much as I can. So let's try this capsule collider, right? You know, whatever. We're gonna try and make this shape because it is kind of circular, but we do have some, like Vincent said, it'd be nice if we can use 2 of them because there's kind of a capsule in here and there's kind of a capsule over here, right? Kind of. If we could just rotate them, it'd be perfect. Unfortunately, you cannot, right? It's too complex for you to figure. So let's try this one. So maybe this one's going to work better. So I'm going to kind of, you know, let's make it so it's a horizontal type of collider where I can squish this part here and this part up here. That might be a little better. Might be a little better. But then we have a big space up here. So again, you can see that there's nothing that's perfect here, right? There's just not, right? It's still, like Vincent said, going back to what Vincent said, it's still far better to use this than to use a kind of mesh collider, which is the geometry type, the polygon, right? It still is better than this. Not as accurate, that's for sure. But remember, my plane is mostly coming, let's just offset it a little bit. My plane is mostly coming from the bottom. Can I even offset it? No, this way. That's the size. I meant offset. And let's move it up a little bit too. Yeah, so there's a little bit of control that I've got here, just a little bit. And you can see that there's going to be a part where the cloud, remember, we're going so quickly that visually, is it good enough? I'm always going to ask you that question. Is it good enough? And if it's good enough, go with it because that's going to be what you want to do. Yeah.
Like level objects, like we have a box or something. And if the objects collide with this, and after that, we go for that polygon.
So what you're asking is, can we do broad phase and narrow phase? That's what it's called. Broad phase collisions, narrow phase collisions. You could, and if in a more complicated scenario where you have a 3D object, I might have a bounding box, just a box around my 3D object, right? So hey, it's going, hey, I'm nearing a collision. Start turning my detection systems on, right? And now let's do this narrow phase collision where I have some kind of mesh collider much closer because I know I'm not going to do the collision checks every frame from a very far away objects, okay? I could also set up a zone, a collision zone. So anything that goes by this edge collider, I can make this massive edge collider, right? And anything that goes, when my edge collider detects the other collisions, the other objects that are coming down, I start doing collision checks for my do I start doing collision checks, right? I can do that too. So the edge collider itself is almost like a zone. So I don't start checking because so broad phase doesn't start or narrow phase doesn't start happening until these things fall. But let me put it this way too. Imagine what's going to really happen. So I'm calculating just my edge collider, right? With everything else. Is it far away? Is it far away? Is it far away? What am I doing? I'm still checking, right? I'm still checking. It's still far away. I'm not doing some more complicated collisions. I'm saving some time. But what can happen in some video games, especially when we're deploying to the web, is it's really fast over here when it's way up far away. And as it comes closer and it enters that the narrow phase collision area, I start doing more checks and it starts slowing down. So then I have inconsistent speed in my game. It's really fast up here. When it comes closer, it gets a little slower because I'm checking more often, right? Now, you may not see it with only a few objects like we have here, but if I have thousands of objects on the screen, like bullet hell, right, you're going to notice it, right? So I recommend let the gameplay be crappy the whole way through, right? Hear me out when I say this. I mean, consistent crap as opposed to inconsistency, right? Like you got bad and good, and then that's way worse, bad and good, than always bad. At least if it's always bad, you're used to that level of badness, whatever it is. And when I say level of badness, it means it might be pretty good, right? It's not perfect, but you're used to it. But if it's really good and then kind of somewhat bad, you notice the bad really, really easily because it's such a difference, right? So leave it consistent. So this isn't a bad collision. I want to try and see if we can use this this kind of collision instead, this kind of collider, on the cloud object. The cloud object is what I really have problems with more. And I'm going to kind of click on apply. So all my clouds have this one right now. Okay, let's try this one and see what the difference is, if I'm any better. So plane, I didn't collide, right? So let's see if I didn't collide. And no. Okay, good. And okay, cool. And I didn't collide. And that probably is a collision. Let's see. One collision, right? That's pretty good, but I was only skimmed it once. I got some checks always too, so I only get the collision happening one time. Okay, that kind of was a collision. Oh man, what happened to my plane? Look what's happening. What the heck? Oh, I'm getting like nailed by this thing. Look, every time I get hit, my plane is like being rocked, right? Well, I didn't add wind. I'm just getting, oh, what the heck? Oh, I'm getting like killed by this thing. My plane is being, look, even from my island, right? I'm just getting knocked. What the? Why is this happening? Okay, this is not the effect of my collider, my capsule collider. That's not the effect. And I think, you know what? The capsule collider is a good example of a better collision than the box collider, right? More complicated collision detection than the collider, because actually what I'm doing is I'm using two circles. That's how it's figuring it out in a box, right? That's what it's doing. That's how it's doing the collision, more or less. But I have another problem, guys, and I want you to help me out here. How come my plane just shifted all the hell all over the place, right? So I'm using my box collider, and I think even for my plane, my box collider is not right. You know, if you look at my the plane over here for a second, and I focus on the plane object, I like the capsule collider more because it's kind of wrapping around my plane. That's pretty good for the most part. Something's not going to get in here unless it was a bullet, right? So for now, for my game, this might be okay, right? I don't care about this so much. I'm pretty tight in the front, which is pretty cool. And on the bottom over here, this part, I'm probably going to hit the wing before I hit this part in here. So I'm probably going to be okay. So I'm probably going to use the capsule collider and get rid of these other ones. So I'm just going to get rid of them. Just to make it more easily, I'm just going to get rid of the circle and the polygon. Definitely the polygon. Polygon's just like nuts to use that thing. All right. My edge collider, I can get rid of that too. There's my capsule collider. Okay, cool. So I got my capsule collider. And now for my island, you know what? I think the island also has a problem because it's kind of squarish. I want to use a circle collider for this one and see if that one's better. It's kind of circular. Let's see if that one's a little better for me. And then I'll talk about this other problem I'm having. And then I'll take a break. All right, so there's my circle collider. Let's undo this one. Definitely actually just get rid of it because that's the wrong kind. And here's my bounding box. See that? That's not bad. I'm going to have a little chunk in there, but most likely it's so close to the actual object that you're not going to notice it. Now, what about if it was a, because I like that one as well. Here's a capsule. Again, capsule collider and circle collider, more expensive than box collider. Box collider is the easiest, simplest way you can collide. So there's more calculations here, okay? But not as much as a polygon. Polygon is like, keep counting, you know? All right, so this is capsule collider. This one is vertical. Maybe I can kind of slim it up here like this, right? You can see that I can kind of make it in there, and then I can kind of offset it just on the x-axis a little bit, just so that it's a little better. And for the most part, this is going to be okay, because notice the bottom part of my circle, maybe a little bit wider on the x-axis. It's kind of a circle, but more towards the thing. So most of the object is being kind of detected. I want to get rid of my circle collider. So I'm going to use a capsule collider on both. So I'm going to remove this component. So here's my capsule collider, right? So I've got this stuff going on. So these are good. But what the heck? Why is this happening, guys? Please help me. I don't get it. What do I got to do? So I get hit by the cloud, and then, oh man, what the heck? My plane got hit, and it gets hit by the island, and hold on. Oh, it's got hit again, and that's not what I wanted. Well, what can I do to stop that from happening? And why is it happening? Remember, I have a rigid body 2D. Even though I don't have a mass, 0001, and my collision detection is discrete, right? I have other positions here, right? And what I want to do is I want to freeze the rotation of my object, right? Because what's happening is I'm getting hit, and it's trying to respond. It's trying to do collision response. So when I get hit by the object, I want to turn because I'm being hit from one angle or the other, right? So if I turn off, if I click on freeze rotation, that'll stop my object from rotating. It'll keep my object straight on, right? All right, so I'm going to save that change, and let's try it out now with the cloud. So now do I get hit? You can see that I've put a constraint on, so I'm not going to allow my plane to rotate, even though it gets hit. Now, the other thing is, does it get pushed back? The other thing I don't want it to be pushed back. I don't want there to be any motion across the y-axis, right? Motion across the x-axis might be cool, right? If I got pushed by the x-axis, but I definitely don't want motion across the y-axis. All right, so I'm going to check that as well, right? Let's try this out. So I can move my plane. Now, if I check the other one, freeze motion across the x-axis, then I can't move my plane anymore, right? That's bad. But I can definitely check my plane movement if I put this way. So this works. I don't get affected, and I'm not going to be pushed down, which is what I don't want to happen. Notice I didn't have to put rigid bodies on my other objects. If I put rigid bodies on my other objects, they would collide off each other, right? And if you had some kind of system where I had some kind of planes or other objects, you want them to collide off each other and bounce off, in that kind of simulation, then you put masses on them, and you might put something else on them so to create that collision. So our collision system is complete. I think we're using Unity collisions. And just to go back to my game controller to show you what I've got. First of all, let's apply all the changes to my cloud and get rid of it, because I don't need that anymore. I'm going to go back to my game controller and put 3 clouds in place. 3 clouds in place. Okay. So we did a few changes this time around. And well, to detect that I'm colliding with them, right? In other words, how do I detect that I'm flying over them? Like I said, that was my own. I already did that. That's my own. I did that last week, right? I'm talking about simple wrapping a collider around and making it work, because some of you may have to do that, but you can do it by code. I'm okay. However you do the collision detection, guys, whether you do it by code, like I showed you last week, or by using Unity's collision system, like I showed you this week, I'm okay. Okay. I should talk one more thing. I'm not going to show you yet, but I will talk about one other kind of collider, right? Notice that the player also has inside the collision system the thing that is trigger. So it's different than a collider. A collider actually collides and has collision response, right? A trigger collides but has no response. So I could make my player collider trigger collider, right? And so I only detect the boundaries being an overlap, but there's no physical response. So the response system, I don't need to use a rigid body to detect a collision. I'm just using it purely as for detection purposes only, which is a little bit more performant, I'll be honest with you. Now, you can't use OnCollisionEnter. You have to use OnTriggerEnter 2D and OnTriggerExit 2D. Those are two different kinds of events you can use, and it provides the same kind of thing with a little bit more performance when you only need to, if you don't have any physics in your system. For now, I'm going to leave it as is, but I'm going to test it before I put it up on GitHub. So I'm going to go again. I'm going to save my project. I'm going to save my scene, and then I'm going to build and run. And I want to build and run on in my WebGL. Remember, for your game design document today, what do you need? You need your game design document and a link to your GitHub. So how can you provide me a link to GitHub if you got nothing, right? So you need to do something where you actually have some kind of prototype going on today, right? It's due today by midnight, right? I talked about it last week. Your team should have something that's that you can put together that shows some basic play. Remember, I'm not using, even if you set up your GitHub repo with your, kind of basic stuff, I'd like to see that. And next week, or 2 weeks from now, because next week is week 6, 2 weeks from now, week 7, you have to have your first playable ready. So actually it has to be playable. You have to be able to move things around and that whole thing. And you guys are way far away from that, right? So that's a bit of a problem. Next week is week 6. Week 7 is where I'm looking for a first playable. All right, so as you can see, this is compiling everything. It takes a little bit of time, but I always check my platform. I'm checking my platform output because, hey, it worked great in the simulator. What if it doesn't work good on my platform? That would be very terrible, right? I want it to work on my platform. Later on this semester, I'm also going to be using mobile. I'm going to bring my iPad in, and I'm going to deploy it to iOS as well, just to show you that you can do it on different platforms, not just on WebGL or on a PC or Mac. You can also deploy it to different tablets. And maybe I'll even put my Samsung tablet together. Good. So now I'm running. You can see way good performance happening, even though I've got my my stuff going on. I have no feedback though, and that's what we're going to handle next after this. If I look at my console, if I inspect my console, remember this is a web game kind of thing that I've created. If I look at my console, you can see that, look, I'm getting register my collisions, right? Which is kind of cool. And I'm registering collisions over and over again because I'm colliding twice. So even though I'm doing debug.log, you can still, in the WebGL version, look at the console and you can see what's happening here, which is really cool. Like this is something that they've added in most recently, I would say. Originally they didn't have this thing, but for a while now they had it. So you can see that as I'm registering a collision, here's one collision for my island, right? There we go, island collision again. I got my cloud. But if I have 2 clouds, 3 clouds, right? You can see that the clouds only collide a few times, so that it's really working. It's really great that this is happening, and I can test it here in the web. Great platform for me because you guys have to make a web game, put it up on some site, and I'm good to go. Next week we're going to talk about, if I don't have time today, I'm going to talk about how to put it up on the website. I want to get it going on on GitHub. You can actually put your stuff to work up on GitHub pages, but this is pretty good. All right, so that was the second check. Now, what I need to do is I want to put this up on GitHub. How do I do that again? Just to show you again, I'm going to kind of quit Unity. Okay, here's my Unity gone. And I'm going to, this is asking me, hey, I've lost my connectivity. I'm going to click this for sure as well. And I've got my Unity projects in here. So I'm going to kind of go to my Unity projects. And inside my Unity project, I have this file right here. Unfortunately, I don't have version control built into Unity that supports GitHub. It does have something else called Collab, which we'll talk about later. But I want to kind of do CD, again, even if it's in your PC, and whatever the project you're going into. And then I'm going to do git add dot. So I'm adding all the files I've just changed, right? And you can see that there's quite a bit of them. And then git commit -m, and I'll say added unity collisions, just so I know what we've done already, right? And it flags all the files I've changed. And then I'm going to go git push my origin remote into the master branch. When I do that, if your GitHub is set up properly, it should just look like this. You can see that my file size right now is going upwards of what looks like 50 megs, 58 meg, almost 60 megs. And I haven't added too much. I only have a few simple objects and stuff. So here's what I want to do for the remainder of the day. I want to talk about user interface. I want to actually show the user interface, right? And if we have time, I'd like to enable sounds. So when I collide, I want to get feedback that kind of show that I'm getting hit. Because right now, you can't even tell. There's no way. I mean, my plane's passing through clouds, and who cares, right? So that's the next step. For now, though, let's take a short break. It's about 9:58. I've talked for about an hour and 20 minutes or so. And then we'll come back after about 15 minutes, let's say. It gives you guys time to get coffee and maybe go back to McDonald's or whatever. I don't know. All right, and we'll resume after this.